All right, I have 6 p.m., so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Roll call.
Mike Netherly,
Here.
Tracy Pugh,
Here.
Dave Rockwell,
Here.
Gary Rowe,
Here.
Dr. Stoner Harris,
Here.
Roy Williams,
Here.
Megan Wilson. Here.
But please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to see, can we get an approval of Board of Education minutes? So motion to approve.
Second.
Move and second, any conversation needed? No, everything's roll call. Roll call.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Mike Netherly,
Yes.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Dave Rockwell,
Yes.
Dr. Stoner Harris,
Yes.
Megan Wilson. Yes. Roy Williams.
Yes. Additions or deletions from tonight's agenda? Changes needed? None, okay, so we can really get a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved. Second.
Properly moved and seconded, and conversations needed in the matter? No, roll call?
Megan Wilson. Mike Netherly,
Yes.
Dr. Stoner Harris,
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Dave Rockwell,
Yes.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Roy Williams.
Yes. So we're on to reports, but before we do reports, I'd just like to have a moment of silence for the incident that occurred in Texas today. One of our fellow education institutions. So I just want to take the time to recognize that an event has happened and have a moment of silence. Thank you, appreciate you allowing that to happen. Board member reports, let's start with Dr. Stoner Harris.
I don't have a report, but I just, want to congratulate us all for getting through another year in the district. And also just want to remind us, thinking about the moment of silence that we just took, of the importance of mental health in general, not saying that was related to mental health, but just thinking about all the students and families, staff that will be impacted, their mental health will be impacted by this incident. And so I think, again, just to remind us all that, we're doing all that we can, and I know we'll be having that discussion, also, but just a reminder to be mindful of our mental health as well as others. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Stoner Harris. Let's go to my right, Ms. Wilson.
I got to attend the Austin Academic Achievement Awards Scholarship Night, which was just really cool to see all the scholarships and awards given out and to recognize those students that are going above and beyond inside and outside the classroom. And I was super excited. I got to give out the second Heart of a Rock Scholarship, which me and my fellow 2010 Rock Island High School graduates, Triana Roberts, and we started for students that have a parent with an illness. So that was pretty awesome to give that out to Jacob Stribling. So I just wanted to highlight that night, and great job to Monte Paceto and everyone else involved in making that night happen.
Awesome. Mr. Pugh.
I really don't have a report, but for next year, I'd like to start seeing some improvements with the special ed program. I'd like to start seeing improvement with our discipline, how we handle that. What do we do with the kids and getting the parents involved in the situation? And I would like for us to look over the summer to maybe rewriting some policies that we are having trouble with, looking to doing that and changing things and getting ready for next year. That's it.
All right, Mr. Pugh, thank you. Mr. Rockwell.
A couple weeks ago, I had the chance to go over to the Figge Art Museum, to look at the art displayed by Rocky students. I tell you, it was amazing to see what was up there. I was proud that my granddaughter had something up there because she certainly didn't get any art skills from me. But as I was looking around at all the drawings and different presentations, a young girl came up to me and asked me if I liked what I saw. And I said, I do. This must be yours. And with a beaming look on her face, she was so proud that her picture was up there. Never seen the young lady before. She was in 6th grade at one of our elementary schools. But she was so proud that her picture was up there. And I thought to myself, if as a district, we can't do anything else, we should give every student an opportunity to be proud of something. So we need to look at every opportunity we can to reinforce the good things that happen in our district and support our kids. That was a really special moment for me. And it was so great seeing the big smile on her face. And actually the work that she had done was quite good. On a ISD note, just wanted to let everybody know that starting in the fall, we're going to change up how we do our division meetings. In the fall, we're going to have a virtual meeting combined with 3 or 4 other divisions so that we can maybe have a little bit stronger program and easier to get to, obviously, when you just have to go to your computer to get there. And then also in the spring, we're thinking of having a Saturday professional development, kind of like most of you did when you did the mandatory training. Tiffany and I attended one on equity a long time ago up in Lyle. That was a Saturday activity and it was quite good. So there'll be a few changes coming and I just wanted to alert you to them so you'll know when you see it. Anyway, that's all I got. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Rowe?
Attended the district leadership team meeting. We reviewed purposes of the district leadership team, looked at functions and some suggestions for additional membership. Talked about the district's equity statement. I thought we'd like to disseminate that. Talked about kind of the issue, an overriding issue of communications with parents in the community. How can we do? First, I think our staff does a really good job. Secondly, you could never do enough. So how do we get everything out to people? So a good discussion. I also attended Rock Island Mountain Education Foundation scholarship night, one of my favorite nights of the year. $137,000 to 77 students. And our colleague, Dr. Stella Harris, is too modest. Her daughter received one of the scholarships. So congratulations to her, as the apple didn't fall too far from the tree there. And then the Medal of Honor banquet, again, another always a good night for the district. And then on Friday, the Ridgewood Elementary School 50th anniversary, a really nice celebration. And you think about the thousands of students who have been educated there and how important that's been. And then one thing to share, many of you know the principal, Joey Julio, he had challenged all the classes in the aftermath of COVID to see about their attendance. So if you had perfect attendance for a week, you got a little treat. And then for 10 days, he said that Mr. Julio paid for himself. They also got to choose a theme. And the teacher that I know, who was my daughter for the 2nd grade class, thought they would pick a sports theme or a superheroes theme. They picked Disney. And so Mr. Julio dressed like a Disney princess. And I cannot unsee that. So I just tell you that the little rewards being on the school board never stop. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Matt?
Getting that out of my mind. I didn't even see
Good.
it.
I'll
so-
share it with you.
Oh. First, just touching on what Tiffany touched on again. This week, I've done a lot of thinking back over this last year and everything that we've encountered as a district, staff, parents, community members, and this year it seems like it's been 10 years with everything that's gone on and that we've endured. And I am not sad to wish this year away and move on to hopefully brighter days ahead in the 22-23 school year. And then on happier notes, it was fun listening to all of you guys give your reports and remembering everything that happened over the last 2 weeks. I did attend the Dankman Leadership Day at the school and allegedly won one of the raffles, but the secretary there has yet to call me to tell me what it is I won. So Lindsay Russell, if you're watching, call me. But it was great to see that school, and it was an opportunity for the different school leaders elected or appointed in each class to give a presentation to open the day, and then they gave tours of the school, which Bankman is a building that I've not had the opportunity to tour previously, so it was great to get that firsthand account from some of the students there, and just great to see them in their more natural elements and out of the classroom structure. And then hot off the press, the Rock Island Rocks softball program in 4 innings won 15-0 tonight down in Peoria. So it was a nail biter, but they pulled it through. So, with that, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, sir. I, like my fellow counterparts, attended a lot of events over the last couple of weeks. They've touched on most of them, so I won't really go there, but I will say, I will offer a early congratulations, because the school year is not quite over yet. We're almost there. We'll go ahead and top that with a commencement here in a week and a half or so. But congratulations to not just the students, but the staff, teachers, administration, everyone. It's been a challenging year. I know when you all come before us, we tend to challenge and pick some of the things you guys bring to us apart for good reason. But just know that we are supporters. We're on the same team. We want to make sure we love on you just as much as we beat you up for good reason. So early congratulations to everyone, and I will turn it over to Dr. Barnes.
Again, my report is going to be very short tonight. You mentioned a lot of the activities and events that are helping get us through the rest of this year. And I'm a little bit different than you, Mr. Williams. Right now, hey, we got 2 days away. We're too close to the finish line. 2 days, 3 days, we're too close to the finish line to not finish. So I know we're going to finish this year off strong. Again, I can't thank all of our staff members, everyone who's a part of our school district. Can't thank you enough on getting through this year, because it has been a tough year. And while we probably thought at the start of this year it was going to be easier because we'd be back and not having to wear masks and all those things, it turned out to be even more challenging than last year, where we spent most of our time remote learning. So, kudos to everyone helping us get through. I do want to just say there's one event that I had a chance to attend on Tuesday, May 17th. It was getting a chance to say farewell to our retirees over at the smaller version of the Hallberg House is what I'm going to call it. But we, to have those retirees there that made it, it was a nice little quaint setting. 395 years when you add together those individuals who are leaving. It's like 395 years of dedication and experience. And so, again, just want to say kudos to them as well. They get a chance to go off to greener pastures, and we just look forward to getting through this year and then doing the hard work of preparing for next year. That's my report.
All right, thanks, sir. RIEA President, Mr. Andrew Haynes, is not here this evening. Communication, request from persons wishing to speak on agenda items, none. All right, and items not on the agenda, I'm assuming none. So on to number 4, committee of the whole. This evening we'll be having a committee of the whole meeting about mental health and well-being of our students and staff. We've been doing this every other board meeting type of thing to kind of have these committees as a whole, talk about things that are relevant to the district. Giving today's events, like Dr. Shona Harris stated, and some of the things that are going on, mental health is our topic for this evening. So as always, this is meant to be a two-way conversation, hopefully non-attributional. And we kind of just want to, know some of the things that we've been seeing and experiencing, some of the services and programs that are active in the district to combat mental health. Just want to bring awareness to those things, and then also start the introductory conversations of how do we move forward, right? That's what these things are all about, talking about the issues, but starting to lay the foundation to how we move forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr.
Sure.
Lawrence, and we'll go from there.
Well, and I get to do just a little bit of, the introduction today, because again, when you have a team and you know that this is some of the work that we've truly been trying to improve, not just this year, but we know that mental health and social emotional learning and trauma-informed care and all these things have really risen to the top of conversations, not only in our district and across the nation, but we have to also remember that those issues and things have been there since before now. And, now it's season. Everything has a season of when it moves to the forefront and you give more attention to it. And now is the season for mental health and well-being. And so tonight, with the help of Ms. Alicia Sanders and a number of our counselors and other team members in the district, they have a short presentation where they'll get a chance to share just some of those things that you talked about, some of the resources and services that we're providing, but then also, just to give some insight on what we're doing and where we're headed. We know that this is a topic that if we all had an answer for it, it would have been resolved years ago, but this is one where you have to be able to pivot and be proactive in what comes. And we have to serve both students and families. And so with that, as you can see, I got a dream team coming up here. I want Ms. Sanders and all of our staff members and support that help provide what we do here in Rock Island Minor School District.
All righty, well, thank you guys very much for having us tonight. I'm Alicia Sanders, Director of Student Services for the district. And I put it out there for whoever would like to come tonight and join in on the conversation. So we have a variety of our members of our support team with us tonight. Patricia Gallego, she is our school social worker at 3 of our buildings. Chris Sierra, who is another district social worker who is at 3 of our elementaries this year. Brianne Pauley, who is a district school psychologist who oversees 3 buildings. Brittany Koopman, another district social worker who oversees 2 buildings. And she kind of has the realm of it. Early childhood horseman, Thurgood Marshall. So she has a wide variety. And then we have Amy Rower, who is a district social worker at our junior highs in that. So thank you guys very much for this evening, mental health and well-being for students and staff. So some highlights that I will share with you, and then we can go in and just, stop us if you want any questions to be answered in that as we go along. I will tell you, thank you. Go to the next page. I don't know who has control. Okay.
You guys are coming. I'm gonna go sit over there. and see.
Oh, yeah, come join us. So one of the very first highlights here is just the student support staff that we have on hand here for the district. Our current support staff is made up of 5 school psychologists who currently are our testing psychs. They do have credentials to be counseling psychs, but with the number of students and the number of schools in that, they truly are testing school psychs for the Rock Island Minor School District. We have 7 social workers district-wide. We currently will be adding an 8th one next year, where the focus area will be that 9th grade at the high school. In a couple board meetings ago, we shared with that 9th grade, we have 96 students coming in with IEPs with the 9th grade in combination from our 2 junior highs, and 44 of them having direct services for social work services. But as well, that social worker will also be working for interventions with other students that do not have IEP. So offering those additional support services in SEL and assisting kids with the 9th grade team to be on track for graduation. We have 9 elementary counselors. We have 2 junior high counselors, 1 at each of our junior highs, full-time counselor at Thurgood Marshall, and we have 5 counselors at our high school. Just some prior to now, back in 2018, we have a difference of what our supports were to current supports now. We had 4 school psychologists, increased by 1, 4 social workers, We now are going to increase by 4. 2 elementary counselors, we've increased by 7. The 2 junior highs, and we have added 1 at Thurgood Marshall and added an additional 1 at the high school. So we have expanded our supports throughout the years, and that with the services that we have seen and the supports that students have needed. Moving forward to the next slide. Community supports frequently used by the Rock Island Milan School District, and worked at putting some of these together. And that Robert Young Center is a district partnership that we've had for 15 plus years. Currently status right now with Robert Young, we have that state care support line, but this year we were a pilot school district with Robert Young to offer a mobile crisis response line that is an immediate access to Robert Young for students that are in crisis. For safety or crisis purposes, we have a mobile crisis response line, automatically goes to Robert Young, and we have a response team that responds to us within 30 minutes instead of the care state support line that sometimes can take 3 to 5 hours. So it is a pilot program that they have been started with us and looking at how do they initiate that out to other school districts as well. It has been a very great service to us this year, and we've been able to assist students in faster services and their families. School-based therapy, all of our 13 buildings have a school-based therapist at least once or twice a week in their buildings. The only building that does not have this service is our Horace Mann or early childhood. But the rest of them right now, we have over 100 students that get service on a weekly basis through school-based therapists like SAS workers that come in and work with them around their behavioral SEL needs that they need. SAS workers, we have students that also have SAS workers in our district that are not being seen at school, but are being seen outside of the school that go into the office. They are on a 60 to 90 day after crisis referral. So there are times when that SAS worker will communicate with the school team as well to look at what additional support school can put in place and services to help align with the supports that those SAS workers are having at home as well with the family. Telepsychiatry. This is something we have once a month. It's the second Thursday of every month, even runs through summer. We have a slot time with Robert Young and the psychiatrist from 8 a.m. till noon to get students in for their telepsych needs. We also provide transportation is available where we will pick up the family. We will pick up the student from school with one of our Johannes buses, and we will bring them to their appointment time and take them back. We often have kids that are on a wait list to get in, but our wait list for them to get into our telepsychiatry once a month is a quicker route than say going into the office. But we also have a service with Robert Young where families can go in Monday through Friday at the early access in the emergency room to get into a psychiatry appointment that day. So our staff in buildings work with families around that. If you have a child in crisis, here is what we can help assist that family to get to an appointment. And that I would say just around all the services that we will continue to share with you tonight and the partnerships in the community we have. One of the things that our support staff do that goes beyond a lot is we do provide those transportation needs for families. We will go to the pharmaceutical and pick up their medication for them so that it is at school. We go beyond the services that we do just within the day, directly affecting students, out for families to get those supports here at the district, or picking up those families to get them to the appointments that they need to attend. Yes.
For the appointments that you were talking about when
Mhm.
we provide transportation,
Mhm.
do students repeat that? Like once they get in that, it's a regular ongoing?
When they first get started, they will be on a monthly, and then as they are in, they may be on a bi-monthly, or they may be like every 4 months they go. And then sometimes we have families that cancel the appointment the day before. And so Dr. Nikki Duke, who is not here with us tonight, one of our school psychologists, she'll right away go to that list of kids that are on wait, call them up, let them know they're the 10 o'clock appointment the next day. So.
Do the students or the families see the same provider each visit?
Same one,
Yeah.
same provider. Yep.
For the parents to cancel the appointment, do we try to reach out to them?
Yep, we try to reschedule right away to get them in at an office appointment. So the psychiatrist that works with us right away will say, hey, I have this opening if they want to reschedule. The one thing that we do find is sometimes our families miss them for several months and then they're dropped. And then we have to reestablish that eligibility for them.
We should question. There's a historic reluctance to seek mental health services because of stigma attached to it. How do you maneuver around that with students who are vulnerable anyway, being adolescents and teens?
Yeah. Anybody want to grab that one?
I think it's all about our rapport building and how we build that rapport with the families. And I will say, with my time here, anybody that I feel like needs that support, once we're able to talk to the families between myself, building administrators, a teacher that's close to the family that they may trust a little bit more right off the bat, we've been able to get a lot of kids the services that maybe they were hesitant to receive. And it does help having that person come into the school, and parents aren't having to drive places for appointments. With working, we have tons of parents that work second and third shift. So being able to provide that within the district is really important.
And there are times that we have to be really creative. There may be a kid that is in one of our buildings and the staff that we have at that building may not have that same relationship and rapport. It may be a parent that went to school with, say, Patricia, and we will tag into Patricia and say, hey, we need your assistance. We know you have built this relationship. We tag in to have another support person come in and help support. And I will say that is the one thing, just with time and constraints and meeting everybody's needs, our team really does a great job reaching out to one another. It would be great to have more time to all get together, meet, throw things out there and that. But in the digital world we're in right now, texting is a wonderful thing because people can put out there, hey, we have a crisis over here. We have this situation. Anybody know any other access within the community that we can get to?
And a related question, are the facilities sufficient? Are they private? Are they discreet? All things that are important to mental health services.
100%. I will say that is one of our top things we guarantee is that it's that privacy and at times we do have members in our school system that get upset because they may not know about a situation, but we make sure that those that need to know, they're the first people. But then if you're not a part of being a part of that need, we're not gonna right away tell you about that mental health and the services, as well as parents. We respect that with parents as well, because we have parents that we're working with as well, getting them the mental health supports they need to help with their student and their services as well. So there are times that we're working as a triage of 3 people in a family to get the support that they all need in that.
And I will say, just to piggyback off of what Brittany said, I think one major thing about eliminating the stigma, because a lot of our families, they don't have the information. And so establishing that relationship and giving them that information, I mean, that's key. Information is key for them. And, just giving them that information that they wouldn't otherwise have really helps open a lot of doors to them being open to going into those kinds of services.
And we also know that with that education piece that we provide for families, it's also, we often feel like we're on an island and no one else has experienced what we're experiencing. And it's really just that communication and education that lets them know that they're not the only one who has gone through this. They're not the only one who has a child with these type of special needs. And there's nothing wrong with their child. They just are learning differently or reacting differently. And we just need to provide the education to help them to respond in maybe an increasingly socially appropriate way.
Alicia, what is the eligibility for students to get these services?
The eligibility
Like, what do they need to get these services?
to get these services here is usually it's a crisis we see or a meeting with school teams and the student having a need and reaching out to them.
It's a tier 3 intervention that we use for all students who need it.
It also depends on what kind of services they are.
Mhm.
For insurance wise, it might be a little bit different, depending on people's insurances, just like it is to go to any provider. But I think the important piece is that we try to get the kids' needs met, regardless if school might be really seem like an easy way, but there's lots of different community agencies that can help out kids that we try to get them involved in. So that even if it may or may not be Robert Young, there's another
Yeah.
agency out there that can help provide services for them.
And we've started creating a master list, especially for private therapy services, because, you know, not all of our students are able to receive the medical card. So those parents that have that private insurance, we started creating a list because we all know there's good ones. There's ones that'll work best with this population of students. There's ones that maybe boys are more prone to respond to better. So I know within the social workers ourselves, we started keeping kind of a list of, hey, who can we refer to with this insurance? You know, who has the shortest wait list if, you know, this family's in crisis now. So it's just kind of finding those resources. And I know a lot of us have made a lot of those phone calls. And sometimes it's trial and error for the family, which is hard, but we just try to keep them on board as long as possible to find that right provider for them, because the right one is different for everybody.
And with the Affordable Care Act going in, we're not even looking necessarily at individuals who are Medicaid eligible. Because with the Affordable Care Act, they're able to sign up for a variety of insurance plans. And there are providers who just, it's not a preferred provider for them, regardless of their Medicaid eligibility. So they may be Medicaid eligible, but aren't able to receive services at Robert Young because they haven't chosen the correct provider to give them the access to that. But there's other places out there that can still provide services. South Park Psychology takes maybe a different insurance, but will still provide for lower income individuals on different insurances. So again, that's an education piece that we need to help families out with, that if this is the doctor that you want to go through, if this is the agency that you want to go through, you really need to check with insurances prior to that sign up time to see if you need to change providers, if that's what your desire is. It's the education piece of helping people who may not be used to having to make those type of informed decisions when it comes to medical and healthcare, but teaching them how to do that.
Do we put any of this like information for like counseling or services that we have for students that might not be in crisis, but that just want to be proactive and, you know, help support their mental health before it becomes a crisis? Do you put any of that out there?
So I know we did during COVID, because we all kind of met and sat down, so I don't know where that was pushed out to. I know it was.
I think it's still within the
On the-
website on the protocols
Yeah.
for support services for COVID and that.
I know in the buildings I'm in, the counselors are proactive in trying to, the kids that I don't necessarily see, the kids are the counselors are proactive and will come to me and say, what do you think about this kid? And we can refer them to services as well. So the counselors in all of our buildings, I feel like are pretty well versed in the services.
And I think that's key, is just later in the slides we get to that, is just providing that wraparound service for kids and what services we have in the building. So bringing the counselor, the social worker, the teachers on board, and the school psychologist, bringing those guys all together and looking at that child and looking at the wraparound services to provide for that student across and their families. And it may be a social worker that needs to tag on to this because of the needs, or it may just be a counselor that would need to come in and that. So it truly is working as a whole unit and towards this common goal.
Not a question, just adding things. Is someone checking to see if their hands being raised?
Oh yeah, I didn't even think.
Talk, I know we can't see it, but I just want to make sure someone's. Okay.
No hands.
So we didn't make a comment, but people online, if you're wanting to speak, please drop something in the chat or raise your hand and we'll go to you, so you can be part of the conversation.
Thank you.
Hopefully you all be here.
Yeah. The next slide, Holly, you can go ahead and move on to. We talk about some more community supports. We have transition services they offer, and we partner with them with some school and office-based therapy services, psychiatry supports as well. Youth Service Bureau, referral base for family and student supports. Our Martin Luther King Center, we reach out and advocate with a substance abuse family advocacy center and prevention services that are also in our schools, not necessarily going to MLK, but the services are brought into our schools as well. Bethany for Children and Families, that therapeutic recreational programming supports of that more extensions for services for the students and families. Continuing on there, Holly, with the next page, CHC Community Healthcare, they have a behavioral health line now where we are able to also refer students not only to Robert Young, but also to community healthcare for some of their mental and behavioral health needs, and that the family resources for our wraparound services, Center for Youth and Family Solutions with behavioral health and counseling. Our Every Child is at that pre-K play-based therapy services, as well as our community support system with Clock Inc. for our LGBT+ students. Does anybody have anything to add in response to all those services? Any questions? And there are many more, we know that. Those are just some of the ones we just highlighted.
Do the parents sit in on some of the sessions for the kids?
So it really depends on the age of the student and how comfortable the student is. We want the student to know too that, you know, it's for them, it's about them, it's a neutral person that kind of navigates that, even between, like, if they're having difficulties at school, they're not gonna come and tell the teacher, you know, that they're mad at the teacher about math, or they're not gonna tell the parent that they're mad they got grounded last weekend. But they do offer, a lot of those agencies also offer family sessions. So I know a lot of my students, they receive individual therapy services, but then every so often when something comes up, they'll bring the parent in and they have a family session and they kind of talk about the dynamics, the communication piece at home, what needs to be different, or what the child might need from the parent, and what the parent might need more of from the child. And we've had a really good response to those. As far as from the kids that I'm hearing from, they enjoy that, but they also like that. Yep, that one-on-one where they're not having to explain themselves for the feelings that they're having around a specific situation.
Just to piggyback off that as well, I know at least for Robert Young, I'm not sure on all the other ones, I can't remember, but when they are initially referred there, that is something that they require, is for the parent to be there for at least that initial session while they're doing that assessment to determine what their needs are and to develop a treatment plan.
Next one, school-based supports that we have in place right now at the elementary. Through COVID, we wanted to ensure that at that tier 1, we had push in classroom lessons happening from our school counselor into all classrooms, as well as that small and individual group lessons happening, crisis intervention, and community-based referrals. At the junior high, some of the highlights that we have are, we have advisory lessons happening on an alternative schedule for SEL building supports called Power Hour, where they will adjust their schedule. They have a power hour and they're diving into that SEL as well as organizational tips for students, and that as well, that counselor is doing that small and individual group lessons there at the junior highs. We have prevention services through MLK with Mr. Jimenez that comes in to talk about that in the science classes, crisis intervention, as well as community-based referrals that are being made. Holly, next page.
How often does the counselor try to get in the classrooms weekly for those tier 1?
For those tier 1s, it really is, I mean, you guys can add, our buildings and the makeup and the number of students in classroom are truly what kind of do that. We have some schools where that counselor can get in on a weekly basis to every classroom. We have other buildings where student populations is 500 and they're dealing with 21 teachers and they're looking at an every 2 week. And then as well as that, really pushing that in-class lessons. But then we also know that it may be my day to go into the kindergarten and first grade classroom, but I just had a crisis incident happen where I had to drop everything because now I'm involved with DCFS right now with a student in crisis and that. But then also, how do we then remake up that plan that needs to happen? Looking at Thurgood Marshall in the high school. So currently right now we have transition services that is 2 times a week at Thurgood Marshall. Robert Young Center with the school-based therapy happening at the high school. Fourth quarter, the Gray Matters Collective chapter just got started with the initiation of teachers and administration and counselor, running that every Wednesday morning at 7:30 in the morning, and groups of students coming and talking about mental health awareness. In that, looking currently right now, I was just told yesterday they have approximately 25 students that come on a regular basis for the past 4 weeks, and that looking at how to expand that. So a lot of students are coming. It's not just a feel that only certain students are coming, but getting a lot more students to come out. Individual counseling, as well as that break a secret box that's set up there for that suicide awareness, where people can report something around mental health. And there's someone that, administrator, as well as a teacher in those buildings that are checking those periodically through the days and turning that over into the counseling as that.
Is there, at the high school, is there a set breakdown of time spent of our counselors from like the academic piece to the social emotional piece?
From that, no, there has not been a time analysis done on the counselors at the high school. There has been some conversations that as we go into the next slide, Holly, I can touch point on that. So this past year, we have, with our counseling group, we put together a district ASCA core team, which is the development of 2 elementary, 2 junior high, and 2 high school counselors and a lead consultant for the American School Counseling Association, and looking at what is a Rock Island Milan School District comprehensive counseling program, and what does that look like? Our work this past year has truly been, how do we align the 9 elementaries to be consistent, curriculum, screeners, moving forward in that. What do I do at the universal level, that tier 2 level, and my tier 3 supports? We will be piloting and going and pushing it off in the fall of what that looks like. Our next year work with consultant will be our secondary. And that is one thing, when we met with the elementaries, we had those elementary counselors do a time on task analysis. Do you have 80% of your time on task for direct services in that? And what does that look like? We found that in our buildings, we have some counselors doing non-counseling activities. So we need to help educate our administrators in schools on what those roles and functions of a school counselor are. So we've started that with that elementary, but with the focus of this ASCA team really working on this and that, as well as we are able this year to send that ASCA core team to the national conference this year, so they can go learn about more things, bring it back, and be able to provide the PD to our district in that for the following year. But yes, that is all to come now as we go into fiscal year 23, is really working with that secondary counseling team and what are the job duties you are doing in that, and are we hitting those pillars of that counseling, that career and readiness, post-secondary, and that SEL and academics approach. As well, yeah.
With the kids that are on suicide, do we have like that are reported for suicide? Do we have like almost like a suicide watch for them, where it's reported to administration, to the teachers, to the let's say security, to keep an eye out on?
So that is all part of that. Like if we find out about it, and that team would get together with that counselor and that administration and that, as well as support team, they may bring in their school psychologist in with it, or the social worker in that, and they would sit down and they would look over things, look at the community agencies with the support there, but as well as school, what type of safety plan do we put in place for this individual now as they walk the school from their full day, and we build those supports in. So yeah, we sit down and we look at what is the level of threat do we feel in this suicide? You know, is this something that the student would act out upon or not? And then what safety plan we put in place for that child throughout the day to ensure that they are checking in with people throughout the day, and that people are watching them and making sure that they're not in any other.
And I just wanted to jump in on the question that you had there, that we
Oh,
have.
the technology.
Right, we have technology in place that if a student is typing words that would relate to suicide or any type of threat like that, it does alert us, and then we do alert their department right away.
And then we send that off to the building administrators right away and the counselor.
That's also where we would get that crisis response team.
Yep.
The Robert Young Center involved, and if a child is making threats as far as wanting to harm themselves, that would be where we would call Robert Young Center and say, as well as the parent, saying, this is what needs to happen, so we can have that threat assessment happen, as well as a mental health evaluation to see what has to happen in order to keep them safe.
Starting for next year, in our elementary schools, we have had second step in our schools. We have had the book editions, and that we are able this year that we can go ahead and purchase the digital platform. What we've seen happen over the years is We have elementary buildings that may have, I have the third grade manuals, but I don't have the rest of the manuals. That's something else that came out in our Ask a Core team is we have buildings that do not have curriculum pieces to be teaching. So they are pulling things and having things as a thematic unit, and we're all going to be teaching this. So putting in a curriculum at that elementary level with second step, as well as our 2 junior highs are starting that Suite 360 curriculum and looking at where do we look at a district-wide universal tier 1 curriculum in that, but having the opportunity to look at that digital platform for second step and what that has to offer for our elementary buildings and that, as well as it being consistent across the district. So if I'm at Dinkman first quarter and second quarter, I move to Eugene Field, that counselor is all on for all across the districts, and kids will still have the consistent lessons being implemented. Pre-K.
Excuse me, can you say some more about second step? I don't know.
Second step, the curriculum, it's an SEL curriculum, so our counselors, social, emotional, yep. So it has different units and bands over like bullying prevention, empathy, and that, and so it'll have several lessons that the counselor will work at certain grade levels, and the grade levels are all aligned to the SEL standards. And so, and then pre-K, working with Nicole Berry in that, I know that they are looking to hire a mental health consultant position in that pre-K level. And that, so adding that additional support at our pre-K, working with our district MTSS as looking at that SEL and behavioral side of the tiers, as well as that additional social worker at the 9th grade. Next, please. Thank you. Do you really know how to say this in the right way? It's just barriers that we do come up against, and that some of the barriers are setting up those meetings, and at times families are on chart to go. We're going to go to the meeting, and then they don't show up for it, and why they didn't show up, and then doing that follow up, and then getting them another appointment, and that. So that is sometimes a barrier for us, is that families don't show up to their appointments. And then we sit there and work with them on, do you need transportation to be provided to get you to your appointment? And then at times we find out then the parent isn't interested. And so sometimes it is really building that relationship and trust with our families. And sometimes it takes 2 years. Sometimes we've seen where really to get that trust level with them, for them to be able to seek that service beyond our school setting. And that we will continue to provide the services at our school level, but then sometimes we do know we need the outreach of community to help support as well. And that can be a barrier sometimes, is the parents' trust and relationship with our community partners, as well as parents in agreement with the services. As I said, insurance, as we talked about, at times can be a barrier. Appointments, those long wait lists, availability for some of our students who truly need inpatient services, not being there. And, around our area, kids at times will be referred for inpatient services, and it may be they're referred to Indiana, and the parent's like, I'm not sending my kid to Indiana. And really, even though that child really needs those supports, that parent cannot let go of that child to go to Indiana and trust in that. I mean, we have that here just locally at Robert Young and our inpatient services and that, and we go Chicago for Streamwood, and that a lot of the barriers are the parents do not want their child to leave this area in that. So availability for inpatient services, and then as well transportation at times can be that barrier as well. We've worked with families who have needed to go to Illinois State University for services that they can provide, and they're unable to get there. We've had to be able to help transport them to those services and that.
What would you all say is the number one barrier that we could focus on to try to improve? I mean, I know that you guys are problem solvers and are doing a lot of that anyways, but what do you guys feel is number one that we need to support?
I think the wait list, yeah, I mean, there's just not enough therapists to provide the supports that we need. So that wait list, I think, is a big turnoff for a lot of families. And a lot of times too, it's one of those things where maybe they can get in with a therapist in 3 weeks. But if they're looking to go that medication out, if it's a mental health crisis that needs medication, they're looking at 3 to 6 to 9 months sometimes. Or like once they start a medication, that follow-up isn't for another 2 to 3 months. And sometimes the first med doesn't work or the first dosage doesn't work. And so that's where we get into that. So many different people provide or, how do you wanna say it, prescriptions for psychiatric meds, and maybe they're not able to monitor those appropriately. So we want them in with these psychiatrists, but it's getting.
The other piece, I think that is one of the biggest barriers, is we live in a society that wants instant gratification. And so if a medication doesn't work, or if they're not able to get into an appointment the day of the crisis, lots of times life happens and it's over and done with and they've moved on. And so when the time for that appointment actually may happen, that the crisis is over, and so the parent doesn't feel the need for it any longer. Even though as the staff and the mental health professionals that are in the school, we realize that we need that follow-up. It's another piece of education that we need to be providing for parents. But lots of times if it's not an immediate need, they don't see that because food, shelter are so much more important to our families, and that the mental health aspect can take go to the side instead of being number one, because the crisis isn't there.
That's not a fault of
No.
yours, but it's a fault of the healthcare system. If a kid's diagnosed with cancer, it comes to you with a bleeding of the wound, you're gonna get care right away. Mental health stuff isn't that different. And we're seeing again and again and again, the tragic results when they're not.
And it is
What
that,
happened to that boy in Texas? Why was he not interviewed?
And our
What
parents
happened
want
to the other kid?
these supports too, and
They
so
do.
it's not on them either, it's, we gotta do better to find those supports. Or I guess create the supports here, in this area, it's not necessarily the school district, but they're looking, and these parents are waiting and reaching out to us for help, and, it's hard on us when we have to tell them, well, our hands are tied, like, we'll continue seeing them weekly, and we have this therapist coming in the building also seeing them, but now what, our hands are also tied.
I had a parent come to me, I was calling them, and she says, the school is saying, here's an option, looking at a physician, a psychiatrist to utilize some help. She feels like the psychiatrist is saying, you need the school to help. So I also see the parents as, we need to build that bridge for them so that we're working better with our community agencies, so that although it's their job as parents to take care of that, we don't want to, for confidentiality reasons or anything else, to get in the way of that. But I think it's critical that we develop those bridges with them so that the school and the agencies are able to work more closely together. Mental health services has a very strict code of ethics and conduct that they do, as well as social workers have a very strict code of ethics that we follow. School personnel and teachers may or may not see that need for as strict of a code, but I, as a social worker, feel very strongly about that. We need to make sure that our community agencies understand that the information that we share is something, again, just like if we share it in a therapeutic setting, it stays confidential. I'm not gonna go and tell Alicia about it, because despite her being my supervisor, it's on a need to know basis, and I can say, this child's in crisis, this is what I need help with, but I'm not telling them what the crisis is and what it's all about. And I think that, again, that collaboration that needs to happen between agencies and schools is critical.
How
It's
can
nice-
that happen better? How would you be able to establish that better? Do you guys ever meet with them outside of that time with crisis? Are there ever like before school meetings or?
We have the Forever Young, and I will say, we all know what it's like, you work from 8 to 3, so we have so many hours in the day to see all these kids that we have to be minutes for based off their IEP. So I know for those of us as social workers, like, that's our priority, and obviously we know these other things. How do I want to say it? We are in reaction mode rather than prevention mode, and we really need to get to that prevention. To where we're able to provide these prevention pieces versus just constantly reacting to crisis. And honestly, we all know we have the additional supports compared to 3 years ago, but the need has also increased tenfold. But money doesn't just appear, so, you know, we can try.
Yeah.
So it's the collaboration, it's the communication piece. It's making sure that there's time in our days or allotted for us also to have the collaboration time. We don't have time to collaborate with each other in our days.
Very
We
much
just
done
don't.
after hours at night, like this is what I need. What can what can you get me by Friday or whatever. So we do a lot of that.
And when we can, we will always try to get a release of information that the parent can sign to, so that we can better collaborate with.
So like the teacher institute days that like just the teachers go, do you guys find those useful, or would it be more helpful if like just you guys were together, or like do you guys have to attend those? Or could that be a
So-
time where you meet with the other people?
Ask her about the 100 emails I sent her about, this doesn't pertain to us, can we go here?
So I will tell you,
I feel
there
like
are
that'd be
certain
a good
things.
time for you to meet with those partnerships and be ahead of the game, like that first week of school, like they have to go there like.
There's
how many
only a few
days?
days a year.
Yeah.
So you have
But
to think
still,
about
it's
that.
better than zero.
But we do strategize that a lot, because I will tell you, there are certain things that are happening on those PD days that we really want our social workers and counselors and psychs to be a part of that team, because they may be talking about services in schools and PLCs on what additional supports kids may need. So some of those in-service days, yes. Some we strategize on, hey, okay, coming out. But one of the things, they're very modest about the things they share. They are servicing kids on a caseload of 65 kids on their caseload. Some of my social workers are in 3 buildings, some are in 2 buildings, some are at 1 building, but their caseloads all average out to about 65 to 70 kids. We know we have over, but additional tasks that they're doing is not only their direct services with the related services, they're also helping out for crisis kids that don't have IEPs, that don't qualify for an IEP. They're assisting in that. On top of that, they have related service logs that they have to document all of their services on their special ed kids. They're doing those at night. They're doing those sometimes on a half a day when it may not pertain to that. I'll be like, you guys sit back and relax, because I know your logs need to be updated and we need to have those in place. And so they're doing those type of things. Also looking at, I'm like, we laughed about this the other day, because I sat there and I said, all right, how many of you have had a lunch this week? How many of you took time out and took a 30 to 40-minute lunch? Because for some people in our education system, they have that and they go to it and they get it every day. But for support staff, that's something that I may have a kid in crisis. I'm not sitting down to eat. They don't clock a prep time. They're like, I could be seeing a kid. I have kids in crisis. I can't have a prep time. I need to do this. So I'm gonna leave it after school, and that's when I'm doing my stuff. Those are things that they're doing, and I sit there and I'm like, oh my gosh, And then we're sitting there, oh gosh, when was the last time Alicia ate? We all sit there because we're always very reactive to situations, and we know we need to go to it and do it. But at the same time, I need them to take care of their mental health as well. And so that is something that I'm always like, hey, how are you doing? And we'll always have a spokesperson in the group that will say, hey, so-and-so, I think you need to check in on this. And we'll check in on it because we're so busy with student needs that we forget about ourselves, or we forget about, hey, let's take time out and let's collaborate and start talking about stuff. And we start off really good at the beginning of the year going, hey, we're gonna meet first Friday of every month. We're gonna collaborate. And then we have emergencies come up. And out of, our staff, only 2 show up that day. So we know that is something working towards next year, that we know we have to have a lot of time, that we are having the social workers, the psychologists, and the counselors all meeting together for a common time to talk and strategize about those community supports and how do we get more communication going with our community as well. And I would say, in our community that we work with, the agency, we may have Stephanie from transition. She's our spokesperson. She's bringing everything back from transition, telling Brittany, and then Brittany's putting out everything on a text message. Hey, you guys, I want you to know this. So we do, I don't want it to sound like we don't have communication, because we do. It's just really.
We're just spread out.
Just so spread out.
We're just not facing.
Yep.
So what could the school district do as a whole to help communicate and help educate the community on what's going on with mental health? Do we do billboards, little things that we could do to help?
I mean, we talked a little bit about the Head Start model is very friendly, because I'm with Nicole at Horace Mann. So I work at the Head Start, they do like family nights, they have, like family service workers that like present like mental health awareness pieces, and obviously that takes time, you know, after hours, kind of figuring that, like Alicia was like, okay, well, who could come in from 4:30 to 5:30 and who would be willing to do this? And so, you know, just having those education pieces, I think, I know at Third and Marshall, Ms. Edwards has blasted it out on her mind, like, hey, here, there's openings at transitions. If anybody, you know, needs help with connecting to services, let us know. We'll kind of get that paperwork going for you. Or we have like a Robert Young referral that the teachers will email us, parents will email us. So I think just like making sure that parents have that information and that anybody can sign up for it. It's not just, you know, specific people. You don't have to be in crisis. That's the biggest thing we need to let everybody know. Mental health isn't just about a crisis. It's a continuous, you're gonna work on it forever, and we all have something to work on it. There's not something wrong with you or a problem. It's just we all have things we could talk about and work on. And so I guess that would be a big thing for me, just
And I think we've been talking about, it's okay to not be okay, but how do we, you know, move forward, and how do we put in those steps for everybody that they're moving forward in that? And so, and I also want to say, like, we've grown as a department and the needs have grown, but also our community across our nation, mental health is now a talking point. We, for so long, it was like, we didn't talk about mental health. We didn't talk about LGBTQ+, you know, all over. We are now openly talking about it, sharing things. Kids are coming to us with, hey, I need these supports. They're talking to us about stuff, and we're like, oh gosh, we need to make sure that everybody is educated and that we have the support set up for everybody. But it's a talking point. And so when it becomes a talking point, we know we have more supports that we're putting in place in that. Because
being fluid with people's roles, like, so if a kid has a rapport with the principal, the dean, the security officer, if that's what that kid needs once a week, twice a week, schedule that time, you know, and everybody's willing to. It's just kind of that misconception or that frame of mind that we see the social studies teacher only teaches social studies, where really they could be that, you know, Tim's most, you know, connected person in the high school. So how can we just be fluid with the awareness is there? So now that we're bringing the awareness, are we prepared for the outcome? Are we prepared for what these screeners are going to show us that these kids need? And how are we going to, you know, give them these supports?
Something that we did in Moline, we took the 5 essential survey, and like based on like how the students responded, like it was like self of belonging or something like that, or like the belonging to the school. They took like, which I'm sure you guys do this, but they took like all the kids that put like the least amount, so like let's say 0, and put them on a spreadsheet, and then everyone in our building took 1 or 2 of those kids to connect with, kind of like a check-in, but not really, and they didn't even know it. But all those little things, like I like what you said, like it's not even really just the counselor's role. If you get everybody involved in that process, making sure that kids are loved, heard, wanted, all those things, I think, you know, and everyone wants to, but it just is about actually doing it.
Yeah. So in one of my buildings, we have something similar, and they call it invisible mentoring.
That's what it was.
Yep, there we go. So we, I'm only there twice a week, so I'm not really part of that, but the teachers are kind of all just said, hey, how many kids you want, who you want, and that's what it is. They're kind of checking in on these kiddos.
And I checked in on a girl, and I randomly got an email last week from her saying, hi, Miss Wilson, I love you. I'm like, it worked.
Yeah.
Because I mean, just a random, because she's a 5th grader, she can email, she knows all of that. Somehow she found my email somewhere, connected back, and I'm like, oh, like I did, somehow I made that connection with her. So I just think really getting everybody involved and making it the first priority rather than all the academics, which I know it's been, especially after COVID, we've been focusing on it more, but
one of the things that I do in my buildings, I know I'm not the only one, is that at the beginning of the year, I kind of sit down with the kids and say, I'm not here every day. And I mean, I've been in these buildings for 2 and 3 years, and they know that. So who can you go to if I'm not here? And just kind of identifying those. Who do you feel comfortable in the school with to go to?
I like that too, like asking them.
Yeah. I just wanted to highlight here at the very last slide here is just staff supports that we put in place. As you all know, in COVID, our team also started to provide more staff supports as well to their days and that. So some staff supports that we've offered this year was we had Gray Matters Collective for that mental health awareness for staff and students. come out a variety of times to speak to all of our educators over mental health awareness, not only about students, but their self as well. Foster's Voice, suicide awareness. We also had him come out and speak to all of our educators. We've had Clock Inc. 3 sessions this year come out and speak to our staff in regards to LGBT+. We also had World Relief come out and talk to our educators about those extensions for our refugee families that are new in our district as well. Building those MTSS structures. Our social workers all have gone through an FBA BIP focus groups this year, which I kind of laugh at them all the time because they're like, oh, here we go into that 4-hour training tonight and that, and they're like, did they record it? But just really diving into what are those true behavior management plans and making sure that everybody in the school understands that that touches the student. And then our HR department, that employee assistance program, EAP. Egan, did I leave anything out? Well, don't worry.
But in January, the counselors at each level worked with us to develop an SEL board for adults on where to seek resources for themselves. So it's an interlinked document that we send out on a regular basis through the Rock Island Lines as well, that gives them ideas for, hey, here's a laugh track, so you just need a minute to step aside and have some humor. Here's the AP links, here's other areas in the organization, and that was developed by elementary, junior high, high school counselors.
And then moving forward into next year, a couple of us at my department level have taken on a book study of the 180 days of self-care and putting that out into the Rock Island Lines next year for staff. This week, this is going to be our focus and having just some little exercises for our staff in that. So, anything else? Any questions? I know there was a staff member here that if any of our staff members wanted to say anything, add any points.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy, please talk, please talk. Hey, it doesn't matter, I can move out of the way.
Okay. Hi, members of the board. My name is Katrina Miley. I'm a social studies teacher at Rock Island High School for the next 3 days. I'm one of those who are resigning this year. One of the main reasons why I am resigning is the mental health impact that the past few years have had on my career, but also on how I've watched it affect my students and my coworkers and how I've seen many of those things go unaddressed. And that was incredibly frustrating. One of the things, I have notes on my phone, hold on. One of the things I wanted to kind of point out is I have various reasons for leaving. Mental health was part of it. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that as I've told people I'm leaving for whatever various reasons, almost all of the responses that I've gotten from my fellow coworkers were, I have so many years left, or I'm tied by my mortgage, or I have kids, I can't leave, I have pay. It's like they're telling me their jail time that they have left. And one thing that you will hear more politely said is that we have a morale issue within our staff, that it's been really, really rough these past few years. And a component that we've been missing is that rebuilding of community. And we have been wishing for that. And I think there's been attempts and we've tried, but it's still very much wanted. So I'm here to reiterate that we very much want to have more community events, either for our staff to get together more or for us to reach out to community. We feel pretty isolated in many senses. And it's been lovely to get back to going to all sorts of school events and games and theater. That's been lovely to go back to, but we haven't met very much as a full staff, at least in my experience at the high school. And so that's been a pretty hard transition. It's been pretty isolating, and it's been an issue that I've seen other people recognize. Other things, when we talk about mental health, we very much have a very student-centered discussion, and that is exactly the way that educators talk. You know, that's how we all discuss our students. But sometimes in those decision-making things that we choose to do, we don't always consider how that affects our staff. So if we make a decision in the best interests of how can we assist our students, are we communicating to staff why that's happening? Or are we being clear about, okay, here's how you can communicate to families how better to do this? Because we found that there are higher level decisions being made that sometimes we don't get explanations for. And when we hear it's about, okay, we need to be equitable in our solutions, which I very much support, We don't always hear that component, and so we don't always understand where some decisions are coming from. So communicating with staff and making sure that we understand and can approve of or contribute to those discussions would be very much helpful. Another thing is that we often are asked our opinions on issues for the school, which we appreciate being included on those discussions on various policy and procedures that we like to have input on. But oftentimes those discussions go nowhere and we are heard and there are notes taken, but no action is taken either. And so that is a concern for us, at least in my opinion, in my conversations with my coworkers. Another thing is that, as we heard from all of our various speakers today, there is a huge demand for mental health services from our students. And I'd say that a lot of the struggles that I've seen my students go through, which are heartbreaking, is that we're getting that sense of student apathy, that unwillingness to complete work or whatever it might be, because they're so completely overwhelmed by everything else going on in their life. And what's unfortunate was that I'm like, hey, go talk to your counselors, go use these resources that we have. If it's a passive thing, if it's not crisis, then they just go, well, they're not going to see me, they don't have time. And when I go to the counselors and I ask, hey, like, what's going on here? Why can't we meet with the student? It's because they're overburdened with other duties, whether that be planning testing or career and college outreach or all of these other really amazing things that we should be providing our school is eating into their time and ability to talk to students and help with those crises. Our counselors at the high school, and I'm sure across the district, are incredibly qualified people who are great at their jobs. And I wish they had more time to help with those situations, because at this point, I'm watching them spend hours of their day going through test book manuals or whatever it might be that's particular time, and not have that ability to have those discussions. And so I reiterate that suggestion, I think it came from you, about reconsidering how we delegate some of those tasks, because that's clearly impacting our students' success and our counselors' ability to help with that success. So I think that's my solution there. These are great first steps, and I'm happy to talk about anything in addition to that. But generally, I hope the board is seeing how many resignations are coming out of the high school and across all of the different schools, and how that's higher than usual. And I hope that we reach out for follow-up from various people, not just myself, but others, about why that might be happening. And for myself, mental health was a large aspect of why I felt like I couldn't stay here any longer. So I don't know if there's any questions or things I could elaborate on.
How long have you been teaching?
3 years.
3 years?
My 3 years have been here. And
So in those 3 years, from your first year to this third year, what difference have you seen? It getting better or getting worse?
well, my career has been completely colored by the pandemic. I saw 3 quarters of what a normal school year would be, but everyone's first year teaching is always crazy. That's a universal understanding of teaching, is that your first year is going to be hard. And everyone's like, oh, it'll get better. And then the pandemic started. So things got worse, obviously, for everyone, as it did for students and everyone else. Obviously, digital teaching was different for every single staff member. I actually quite enjoyed it, because being on the younger end, I'm pretty familiar with a lot of these tools. So for me, that was a comfortable transition. But it was hard watching students struggle to come in, attend classes, watching that apathy grow and grow, and struggling to find resources to help address that. That was difficult. And this year coming back, everyone's like, oh, we'll be back in the building, it'll be better. You said it this morning, right when we got here. And one of the things I remember saying in meetings last spring was, you guys know something's coming with social emotional, like, you know that this is coming down the road for us when we get back. And I think we tried to commit to some supports, but there was definitely some things we could have helped more with when we saw this coming at us. And so discipline's been an issue. I would encourage looking at how our discipline is handled in lots of ways. I think there's different things we could do better. Because at this point, a lot of people are sitting at a very frustrated point. And as someone who has the immense privilege of being able to walk away and be fairly okay financially, I just am concerned for my coworkers who feel like they can't come here to speak and they can't come here to tell you that that is a problem. So that's kind of why I felt like I had to say something today.
Well, we appreciate you coming to speak. As a person of the same thing. So it's good to get that in an unfiltered way. I think there's, like you said, there are bigger conversations that need to occur, not necessarily at this level, potentially, but from the district to your union, and other things that need to happen. There's never enough time or money for the things that are needed to make education successful. And so those are the hard conversations that we signed up to have, to approve, and why we hired this guy right here to bring those recommendations to us, so we can spend that money. So.
And I would
appreciate-
encourage a sense of community. That would definitely help, whether it's within our students or our staff, building that community back and getting us out of that isolation zone for everybody would be helpful.
Thank you for coming, and I really hope someone's gonna be reaching out to you for some more ideas and feedback, and
I have a
hopefully
meeting
there's
with
like an
Egan on
exit.
Thursday.
Yeah, I was hoping there's
Yeah.
an exit meeting happening to hear about why, and
Yeah.
thank you for your time here.
Do we have anybody online? Nope. I want to make sure we're keep checking on those folks. So we're. Oh, welcome.
Good evening.
Evening.
Mental health. So we'll start with the teachers. Do I need to say my name and all that fun stuff? Or?
Yeah, we just kind of.
Oh, okay. Dr. Yolanda Granberry Pugh, teacher at Rock Island High School, live in Rock Island. 3921 24th Avenue, Rock Island. Okay, so we'll start with the teachers' mental health piece. The reality of the situation is being a teacher is a stressful job. That it just comes with the territory. I often refer to it as spinning plates. We are constantly spinning plates. If you guys remember, I can't remember it now, but it became on early in the morning when we were kids, 8 o'clock in the morning, the Bozo show. And there was the guy that one of his tricks was keeping all these plates spinning at one time so that none of them would crash. That is the reality of a teacher's life. We have to make sure that administration is satisfied. We have to make sure that parents are satisfied. We have to make sure students are satisfied. We have to make sure our colleagues are satisfied and everybody else in between. And so it is a stressful job within itself. The pandemic made it worse as far as the emotions that we ourselves were feeling. The rest of it seemed as if the rest of the world wanted us to show up in the building, surrounded by this virus, while everybody else was still being safe at home. That may not necessarily be the case, but that was the perception, which just kind of like added on to the stress. So definitely, we needed some outlets to be able to discuss our concerns and our frustration. I think some of us got that and some of us did not. It all depends on that particular teacher's situation. And then for a new teacher, someone who was taught 5 years or less, it probably was extremely stressful. Seeing how a couple of their years they were having to adapt and adjust. So I can imagine the stress. That's not to say that it's not survivable. At this moment in time, we do have the Climate and Culture Committee at Rock Island High School. I serve on that committee with Lori Anderson and Megan Jackson and Mr. Reiser, I think that's his name. I don't want to start naming people because I don't want to forget anybody. But we did create a plan to touch on all of the things that she has mentioned as far as the teachers' morale, as far as getting students more engaged, getting teachers more engaged. We just are waiting for the opportunity to roll out our plan and hopefully for it to be approved. And then we can begin executing next school year. A lot of the things that we do have planned, which are pulling from the things that we have done in the past, but also at the same time, bringing in some new things. As far as like the career day was successful. So we plan to have a higher learning day next school year. The student leadership summit was successful. So we plan on doing more of those. We would like to bring back some of our, I want to call them pep rallies, but it's spirit rallies, things of that nature. So there is something in the works concerning that.
Yolanda,
So yes.
Does your team just focus on the students, or are you guys talking about staff as well?
what we did is we surveyed the students and we surveyed the teachers to get their feedback as far as what did they think were the most important things that should be enhanced at Rock Island High School. And so we looked at the results and then we came up with a plan based on what everybody said. So that's the teacher aspect. Hopefully, we will be able to bring back that family feeling that we once had at Rock Island High School next school year with the things that we have planned. That is the hope. So not denying those things that have been said, but more on the problem solving end of the spectrum, to whereas we think we can solve some of the problems, if not all of them. And then as far as our students, definitely this school year, we've had a lot of students who needed someone to talk to on a regular basis. I know that many of the teachers have practiced if the student says, I need to speak to my counselor, no questions are asked, the pass is written, please go talk to your counselor. Ideally, if I was, queen for the day, the counselor office would probably have about 2 or 3 more counselors because they do have a lot of duties. And they are being, everybody's trying to be the best that they can at one time. But we have, the last time I looked, I believe we have 1,700 plus students at Rock Island High School. So we definitely need some more counselors. That's coming from a teacher's perspective. We also would benefit from having another school psychologist because the one that we have now, she's like really focused on the SPED department, which is important. So if we had another one, then that one would maybe be able to talk to our students about the emotions that they are having and feeling. With the Student Leadership Summit, the second one we did, we had students develop action plans. With the first Student Leadership Summit, the students just pretty much identified their concerns and what they felt were problems at Rock Island High School. The second one, we asked them to engage more with problem solving. And I bring that up because one of the students, her idea was to create a student organization for students where students could come and talk about their concerns and their issues. And one counselor was in support of that. I don't know where it's going to go, but it was put on the table. So we are trying to do things for our students at the high school. We're aware that we have some things that we need to work on, but we have moved into problem solving mode.
Awesome. That's awesome. It's good to hear that we've been, I would say the board's been very concerned. We've been, not just the board, just in general, we put a lot of focus and effort into the high school, not only facility wise, but also conversations. And so that's the morale, not just of the high school, but of the district from a student perspective, staff perspective, community perspective, has been something that we, as a team of 8, have been talking about and discussing. So it's good to hear that there are already things happening at the building levels that we may not be aware of. That may be a plan that can be taken or down to other buildings at the other building levels to see how can they address that climate and culture in their buildings if that's an issue at their level. So thank you for that information. Appreciate it.
Again, thanks for the whole problem solving piece. We just know that, like everyone shared, there's a lot of resources, there's a lot of entities out there, and we know the need is going to continue. So hopefully one day we can get to, instead of being reactive, because we are, you drop everything and you go to the need. And we hope to at one point get to a point where we can be proactive and we can deal with things before they get there. Again, I commend everybody on everything that was shared tonight, new ideas that are coming up for next year. And I want to make sure that all of you get a nice, restful summer so that you can have a little bit of time off for just yourselves. But then just know that we're in education, right? We know every year. Remember when you were at the first day of this year, you knew everything that was on your plate. We talked about what we had to do and new ideas we're going to try. We get to this point now, good thing about education is you get to restart every year. You get to go back and say, here's the things that I tried that were successful. Ooh, that didn't go too well. Let me work on that piece. And I get to try all over again because the work never stops. And just to know that we have a team of individuals in the district that's going to continue working towards getting to proactive instead of reactive, we're going to keep chipping away at it. And that's all we can do at this point.
I think Mr. Yancey wanted to speak.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Leonard.
While Mr. Yancey's walking up, I just wanted, somebody had made the comment about food and shelter being in the barriers, and I have firsthand experience in seeing the resource room at the high school and what it's done to be able to assist students. My wife worked in it for a little bit, now Kathy Leilonic is taking it over. And I don't know to what extent that sort of program has filtered down into some of the other buildings. I've heard that it is in some others, but especially with the strain on the medical resources, if we can bolster those non-medical resources where you could have just a caring community member, maybe charge that, then when their time came up on that, however long of a wait list, we would have potentially removed some of those barriers from them, allow them to continue down that path. So it's good for thought on that. I yield the floor.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was just listening. I was impressed with some of the things I heard. The reason I'm up here is because I hear where an individual is going to resign because of, and that's one thing, and I'm just thinking about my own career. And I've taught high school students, special ed. I've taught elementary, as well as teaching adults in prison. And if ever I had reason to be quitting, I could tell you a story, but I'm not going there because that was an individual choice that I made to stay involved with education. One thing I think that we need to realize is our teachers are with our students at least 24 hours a week. And we see that child in all aspects of his or her life. When I heard some comments, I'm thinking, and this was, I didn't realize how tough it was for the teachers because I've been out. But since we had the virus to deal with, I was thinking, okay, I see what's happening. One of the things that I think we need to take a look at is what type of professional development time do we give our teachers for certain training? I'm not going to get into the union contract because I know what the contract says, and I'm kind of disappointed in that too. But my point is this: with everything that's going on, I've heard that we need to be more, proactive. I've heard that for years, and we're still being proactive. Not going to go into how old I am because that's not important, but I keep hearing this: we need to be proactive. When are we going to get to be proactive? I heard tonight, and this is something I think that's very important. We as classroom teachers are probably, besides the parents, see issues with students, and we can help to identify those students. But are we trained, or are we shown, or said these are things that we need to look at? And at the same time, when we're doing that with students, we can see that with ourselves. I realize now that one of the biggest things that we need to realize is that we're going to have to sacrifice some time and maybe not get paid. Because with the things that just came up over these past 2 years, just dealing with the virus is brand new to everybody. And I think the impact is great on the students, the parents, as well as teaching staff. Those are the kind of things I would like to hope that we begin to look at. Saying what we need to do is one thing, but doing what we need to do is another. And again, after I heard this person after 3 or 4 years want to go, I understand that we have personal things in our life to deal with. But I'm also thinking, if we had access to the training where people knew what we were going through, how we can adjust to deal with it. And at the same time, please keep in mind, the same thing that we as adults are going through, our children are going to go through too. So if we can't get ourselves together, how are we going to get them together to deal with their life down the road? I'm still concerned because I don't have any answers other than, and this is to all the union teachers too. We're going to have to give them some time and some money. we're gonna have to realize it, even though we need to survive because we need to be paid, but at the same time, we have to find a way to where we can be more aware of the things that we need to deal with. Because this was brand new, we didn't anticipate this. But the impact is just on the students, it's on the staff too. And I didn't really realize how bad it was until tonight, because I can hear things, and I just thinking, okay, that's something that we have to pay attention to. That's all I had to say. And I think if I need to stress anything, yes, we need to be proactive. How long is it going to take us to get there? Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and close that. I said I'd let it run a little longer than an hour this evening. And I've done that. So with all of these committee of the whole conversations.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you all for your participation. Here, they're the initial conversations. The hope is that we come here, we have these conversations, we take our notes, we go back, we start developing action plans to address these issues. So we've had several of them this year. The intent is to continue this kind of format into next year. And hopefully we come back next year and we talk about mental health, and we talk about all the great advances that we've made from this conversation to the next. I will allow board members to say any last comments before we move on to the rest of our agenda this evening. Any comments, right or left? Dr. Stonehara, she's still out there?
I'm still here. So
Okay.
yeah, you know, I could go, you all know I could go on and on about mental health as a licensed clinical mental health counselor and counselor educator and supervisor. But I just wanted to really hear more than speak tonight. But what I will say is, you know, I know that as a district, from the time I got on the board 8 years ago, I have seen a shift in terms of us having more clinical staff available, more mental health staff available in our buildings, which is a plus. I know that we're still challenged in our structures around services to our students. It's nice to hear that we have a variety of services that are accessible to students. I would encourage us to, and I heard someone speak on this about collaboration, and you know, my thinking on this side as I was hearing that was really the coordination of those wraparound services, because we can have all the services available, but if we don't have a system in place that's truly helping students connect and maintain services, not just on paper, but in practice, you know, we're falling short. And so I would encourage us to think about, you know, we talked about where the barriers were, but it sounded more external than internal. And so I would encourage us to think about where our internal barriers continue to exist, specifically around the coordination of care, prevention, like you all were talking about being more proactive than reactive, the prevention and intervention, you know, having those pieces in place. For years, we've talked about the high school not having groups to meet the needs of some of the neediest students, you know, students with the highest needs. That's still a discussion. And, you know, we can still wonder why is that not in place? And we've heard some of the reasons why tonight, but then my question would be, so what are we doing to, you know, if our counselors that we have in place don't have the availability in their schedules to have prevention and intervention groups for some of our high need students, what are we doing? What do we have in place? You know, if the social workers are doing it, what does that look like? You know, having that coordination of care between the you know, different clinical staff that's in the buildings. And also, you know, the other piece I was thinking about when I think Mrs. Sanders was sharing about some of the educational programs that have come in for staff and also students, I heard some specialized trainings that were, or specialized information that was being presented, whether it's Gray Matters or Clock Inc. And so I would suggest, and I would hope, because we do have a high African-American population. We've even talked about World Relief with our EL community. We do have a high African-American population, that we are thinking specifically, again, thinking about targeted areas, Black mental health, what that need is for our students in the district. When we look at, again, we can look at our data, when we look at our, referrals, we look at our behavioral data, we're seeing certain populations show up, but yet we're not targeting those populations with prevention and intervention programs. And so I would encourage us to, be more intentional in that area as well, as we are in other areas. For some reason, when it comes to, and I'm just going to say it, we have our CQ team in the district, but when it comes to issues around race and race specific needs, we shy away from that. We don't want to acknowledge it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to put things in place specifically, whether it be a prevention intervention or even, something that is celebrating, students or faculty, which would also impact mental health in a positive way. Again, I give kudos to Dr. Granberry Pugh for this year doing some things that really targeted specific student populations. And so, I would just encourage us to look at the gaps. Where are the gaps in our mental health services? And to, go back to the mission and vision of what we say we're doing in relationship building. Again, someone came and spoke tonight about some aspect of connection and relationships and the morale. And so, we have those things in place on paper, but we're hearing enough about it from stakeholders to know that it's a concern, and we need to do something different. Again, somebody said it here, it's not, we can't just keep talking about it and not acting different. That's all I have.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, with that, we will close out the committee of the whole and move on to action on routine matters. Request for future agenda items.
I have one. And I don't know, again, I know I've missed a couple meetings, so I don't know if this has come up already, but in talking about COVID and thinking about the impact to student, staff, and families, I've been wondering how we're addressing specifically student deficits. What are we doing differently to manage student deficits versus how we might have traditionally done things in terms of, students are not meeting a certain standard that they might be referred for an evaluation for IEP. Are we doing something different, knowing that over the past 2 years, this has not been a usual time of learning or teaching, if we want to be real honest, for students. And so I would like for us to hear specifically what we're doing different to meet the needs of some of our students who aren't meeting the standards or the levels that the targeted levels that they should be meeting. What interventions we have in place. Are we doing some reteaching? What are we doing other than our normal practices to address those students' needs?
Thank you, Dr. Sonny. Sorry, I was just checking with Mr. Matherly about must be missing. I'm just blind. That's okay. My wife tells me that quite often. So moving on to the blanket motion. Does anybody wish to remove anything from the blanket motion? If not, can I get a motion to approve the blanket motion as presented?
Also, second.
Probably moved and seconded. Any conversation needed about anything on the blanket motion? Oh, roll call.
Dr. Stormy Harris,
Yes.
Dave Rocco,
Yes.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Megan Wilson. Yes. Mike Manderly,
Yes.
Terrell Williams.
Yes. All right, moving on to operations, item 6. Looks like we're gonna have RIMSD 41 discipline improvement plan. Get a motion to approve.
So moved.
That's me.
Moving seconded. Ms. Sanders.
Yeah, I will give you some updates. So ISB has issued exclusionary discipline improvement plan. So as part of our district and moving forward, we have been cited for out-of-school suspensions for our district for 3 consecutive years. There are 3 different areas of exclusionary discipline, one being suspensions out of school, second one being expulsions, third one being racial disproportionality. We are not in the top 20% and we have not met in any of the areas of expulsion or racial disproportionality, but we have for out of school suspensions. So we, as part of ISB and moving forward, we needed to put together a discipline improvement plan for the fiscal year 23 coming up by June 1st. In this plan, we needed to look at our data for over the past 3 years and look at those trends. I will tell you in 2017, 18, 19, and 2020, we were in the top 20% out of the 800 school districts with our out of school discipline and out of school suspensions. One thing in our trend that we did notice, and I put into this plan, is our enrollment also decreased by 700 plus students. And therefore our enrollment decreased, but our out of school suspensions still were at a higher rate. So within this discipline committee, looking at what steps do we need to put forth as a district to start looking at those preventative measures and be more preventative than reactive to out of school suspensions. One of the things right away looking at and putting in place is developing and implementing an elementary and secondary annual assessment on behaviors, having our behaviors in 4 different categories. And when a student has an infraction, which level of category does it meet, and going across the rubric in regards to what that outcome could be. We shared this exercise with administrators in our district, use live scenarios we had this year with them, and going about, do we promote this and move forward as a district? They all said we needed to move forward because what we found was some of our emotions as a human went into the factor of how many out of school suspension days you received truly to the offense. One thing looking at is be truly looking at those out of school suspensions. Very rarely, we have a higher percentage of kids that are being out of school suspensions based on behaviors that are not violence with physical injury, weapons, or drugs. They're categorized as other. So that is a concern because those others, we can look at how do we put in restorative practices for those. So the very first thing in our action plan is moving forward next year with that behavior assessment rubric aligned to the behavior categories, as well as administrators will only be able to suspend up to 3 days out, and they will need district designee permission for 4 days and beyond. So that we are able to, which will fall into my department, which I will be able to look and ensure that that assessment category really fits the 4+ days that the student needs to be out of school. Another action plan is bringing you monthly exclusionary data by our schools. So you can see what the trend is looking like at our elementaries, junior high, and high schools, not just at a quarterly strategic plan, but monthly, submitting to you what those exclusionary practices are looking like in our district, so that we right away can have those conversations of, are these truly warranted suspensions? 2 is the implementation of our MTSS social emotional learning and behavioral tiers, ensuring that we have the supports put in place for students in the classroom as well as around the district. Continuation of that development of that district-wide counseling program K-12 with the American School Counseling Association ASCA alignment. We are also implementing a development of alternative to suspension program at our secondary level. We have been piloting that this quarter with Ms. Edwards at Thurgood Marshall, but as well putting it in our schools as well. Not that they have to go out of our schools, but it's an alternative to suspension where students still can continue to get their education throughout the day in another setting where they also are getting a touch point of an SEL connection that day as well. Last thing is having that implementation of our PBIS in all of our schools. Those universal approaches, trauma care, restorative justice, bullying prevention, and early childhood, getting that professional development at our school levels and ensuring that we have a PBIS framework for our district and that we understand the tiers and those next steps. Those are a lot of items to be done, but they're actions that need to be looked at. When we look at our suspensions, and we did that exercise with our administrators, we saw that when they were on the rubric, they were spot on kids that could have been just a restorative conversation with a counselor or a teacher, and the kid may have been suspended for 3 days. So we really truly need to have a alignment of how we are suspending and what we suspend for, and really focusing on that. Did it meet that matrix level of out of school exclusionary behavior based on physical violence with injury? Is it a drug or weapon violation? And did we place in the support needed for those students that have that? And looking at all the others that buildings are doing for out of school discipline, and truly what are the things we need to put in place in our schools to help promote kids to be in school. It will help with the graduation cohort and kids being on track to graduate. So I needed to present this to you with this discipline improvement plan moving forward next year, and you would approve that moving forward, that we will go ahead and ensure that we put these steps in for the fiscal year 23.
Alicia, when you met with the administrators from each building, did you guys have a discussion of what each building is doing already building wide for behavior management, like PBIS, for example? And I know a lot of people are doing the 7 habits.
Yeah, we do. We have a lot of administrators that share things that they do in their buildings and things that they're promoting, and that we have quarterly celebrations to help promote things. And that I will tell you, when we look across at our out of school suspensions this year, and that we do know as they articulate up to that secondary level, that's where we see a lot more out of school suspensions happening in that. So for the past 2 quarters, I've been working with the deans at the high school, just running through this behavior matrix and having those conversations with them. Let's look, meeting Mondays with them and going over some of the behaviors they have the previous week and talking it out, getting that connection for special ed kids as well, looking at our trend of how many of our special ed kids are in exclusionary suspensions as well, and are we adhering to their 10 days for the school year and putting in those additional supports that they will need as well to be successful in the school setting.
And I was just going to add with that piece, the code of ethics, again, the code of conduct is, again, it's another tool that we as a district use. We're looking at types of consequences that can be given if you're level 1 or level 2. It gives you a range of different types of consequences that may fall for those levels. But with the activity that we did with all of our administrators, you pretty much, and again, it's an idea that I brought an idea. We looked at some things that some other districts do too. We know that some of the incidents that students become a part of, they can be grouped into various types of activities and events. Sometimes an activity may only warrant, if you have a level 1 meaning having a counseling conversation with staff, or level 2 meaning now we need to have a parent conversation, or level 3 getting to the whole suspension or even expulsionary step. It still kind of warrants and makes sure that for consistency in district, consistency in buildings, that this type of activity happening over at Dinkman, the same activity happens over at Eugene Field. We know that there will be some consistency in consequences, because again, like Ms. Sanders said, sometimes your emotion gets into it. A kid call you the wrong name, they speak French on the wrong day, and you're not speaking French. That impacts people differently, and for some who may feel differently during that time at that moment, it may warrant that you're going to receive more days of a consequence than you may have been if we looked at it differently. So this is just, again, another one of those ways for us to look at trying to be consistent, but then also trying to make sure that the consequence fits the action. And sometimes it may just warrant a conversation with a parent, and other times it may warrant that you go home on an out-of-school suspension. There are some activities and some things that warrant you go home. You leave the premises. We have some of those actions that take place. So this is really a more consistent way to try and do so. And we would expect that when you can be more consistent on what triggers certain consequences, then you can be consistent over the district. And it truly will lead to, it's going to lead to making sure we can control those suspension days.
And just to kind of give you just an educational piece on the requirements of eligibility, to be on the suspension rate and to become eligible, you have 10 or more out of school suspensions in your district for the year. So therefore, our district size of 6,000 kids, 10 or more out of school suspension events will constitute us being eligible. But then if we're eligible, we get factored into another group of who are the top 20%. So that is where in some of the guidance and that I provided for you is looking that, we may have been 108 out of 533 districts that made that top 20%. So that's another thing to kind of like calculate in our minds is we know if we have 10 out of school suspensions for our district, we know we're right away eligible. And now it is how do we look at making sure we don't hit the top 20% in that. And another thing is if a behavior happens and it's warranted to be an out of school suspension, we need to treat it as an out of school suspension, not try to hide it and say we're not going to do the out of school suspension. Because if the behavior warranted it, we want to make sure that we are ethical along that line as well.
Terrell, if I could.
Yeah.
Dr. Lawrence just speaking, I think you said consistency about
Yes.
a dozen times.
Yes.
And we're talking obviously about out of school suspensions and everything else. But I tell you what, consistency at the beginning level of discipline is probably the most important part of the whole puzzle. Because if I'm in Egan's class and me and Gary do the same thing and he gets punished one way and I get punished greater, I can tell you, I'm going to be irritated by that. Right. So even just, I don't care what it is, not bringing your pencil to class. We have to make sure at not just the building level, but at the class level, that every teacher addresses the situations the same, which is basically pretty hard to say when you have how many teachers we have, how many classrooms we have. And we have 6,000 students, all with different personalities. But consistency has to start from day one, not when you get to the level 2 and level 3.
Yeah. And having those conversations, I would just respect the stuff that this Dr. You just said with us, just that consistency of that climate and culture in our buildings, making sure that we're looking at that monthly and consistently in our buildings and putting in those steps to help be preventative toward looking at another suspension happening and that what are the things we're putting in place with the knowledge we have right now in August to help us get to May. And that instead of getting to May and going, oh, we had 600 out of school suspensions, now what do we do in that?
If that student population decreases for the whole district, or is that just for the high school?
It's the entire district.
So we, 700.
Yep.
You know why we're losing kids like this, graduation, or they just
Mobility or factors that, we don't have numbers of kindergarten kids coming in and that a decrease in the population. Thank you.
I'll just say two things. One, we talked about restorative justice as a school board for a while. This may be an opportunity for us to lean forward on that. And then two, I'm trying to be more positive. But I do want to point out that a lot of the things that are in this action plan were already underway in this district. And so it's good to hear that we are leaning forward in some aspects, and we're just going to be able to apply some things that we were doing to address this particular issue. So I just wanted to point that out. All right. Going on to, my bad. See, I'm out of practice. Mike, you want to take back over?
Who seconded the motion?
Oh, quickly, I just want to add real quick. I know we're talking about subjectiveness and objectivity, in responding to student behavior or student needs. But I would also say in our assessment of what the intervention should be or approach should be, there also has to be some objectivity in how the leaders respond to the staff, in terms of if they're recognizing the staff is stretching the situation with the student and maybe overreaching in the consequence, and looking more at deficit versus, how we can be proactive is the word I think Dr. Lawrence used. I would encourage us to really think about where that accountability lies with the leaders to assist with that whole process. And again, from a from an objective perspective versus subjective, because that can really easily occur when the leaders are quote unquote, colleagues or have been colleagues or, friends, of their staff. And so I think, having systems in place for consistency is important, but we also have to have leaders in place that are willing to hold people accountable at the same time for appropriately using systems.
Dr. Stoner Harris, this is Alicia Sanders. I just wanted to add as well, you brought up a very good point. In this discipline assessment rubric, there also is a mitigation area when you're looking at the points and how it aligns to the discipline, because there are factors that we need to consider as well. Does the student have an IEP, a 504 plan? Does the student have a family crisis that may be happening? Is this a student that we've been contacted with handling care with an event that something has happened outside in the community that this behavior has happened? We also need to take in those mitigating factors as well that will help deduct certain points and also align more direct services to that student based on a behavior choice that was made.
Mike seconded.
I had Mike down, I didn't have, who's been.
Maybe I made it.
Maybe me. I can't remember that 5 minutes ago.
Thank you.
All right. Roll call.
Teresa Pugh,
Yes.
Dave Rockwell,
Yes.
Mike Natherly.
Yes.
Lori Rowe,
Yes.
Megan Wilson.
Yes.
Dr. Stoner Harris,
Yes.
Terrell Williams.
Yes. All right, now we're going on to business finance. Level commercial fence and deck, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Probably moved and seconded. Any conversations?
I just have a question,
Yep.
since the Horseman Early Learning Center is our responsibility and our property, why aren't we using district funds to put the fence up instead of having Nicole use her limited budget for this? I don't know, maybe that's not an unfair question, I don't know.
Each year we have multiple meetings I have with the finance department to determine about if I have to shift funds around or do anything with that. This is something that actually we had funds left over this year. So these are funds we wanted to allocate to some of the repairs for our centers. So we try to the best of our ability to try to be helpful to pay for some things when we can, if we're financially able to do so.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Was there a dollar amount for this contract? It's not in the motion.
There is, but I don't have it with me, Mr. Williams. I'm sorry. Trying to recall.
$12,500.
12,500.
All right, 12,500. All right. Any other questions, conversations? Thank you for the information, appreciate it. Nope, roll call.
Dave Rockwell.
Yes.
Dr. Stoner Harris,
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Megan Wilson,
Yes.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Mike Manderly,
Yes.
Terrell Williams.
Yes. Moving on to item D, Staples paper order for 2022-2023 school year. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. The only thing I will say on this is I didn't think I'd ever be approving a motion to buy paper to do stuff. So this is a new one for us. There's a reason for it, but who's taking this one, Dr. Lawrence?
I mean, if there were any questions with respect to it, again, the ROE used to take on that role of ordering paper for all those in the ROE, and right now, nobody took the contract. So, unless there's anything that either Jim wants to add or what have you, we need paper. We do. We can't fully get away from it. So we have to make sure that we're prepared.
We reached out to Sourcewell, which is a cooperative that we're in with. They gave us the best pricing available right now. There's a paper shortage nationwide. Paper is very fluid, is what they like to use. So we had to do what we could to do alternate methods to make sure we had paper for our teachers for the school year.
Understood.
Thank you to that. We still like to.
Any other questions, conversations, better? Paper, wow. Roll call.
Megan Wilson.
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Dr. Stormy Harris,
Yes.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Mike Manderly,
Yes.
Dave Rockwell,
Yes.
Terrell Williams.
Yes. Moving on to personnel. Action A, 22-23 hourly wage for part-time employees. Get a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Probably moved and seconded. We're gonna have someone talk on this. It's just, I know this is just escalation, but again, for those who have not been in the know.
Even how many part-time people does this affect?
About 70.
About 7, and the average number of hours they work each.
I can tell you that the average per hour increase is $54 total, and the total increase, yeah, it's about $54 more an hour overall with this. So the recommendation is based on the steady incline to reach $15 an hour for the Illinois minimum wage by 2025. We did double check this because I know the board has shared, hey, is this the right amount? And we checked it mid-spring against the market, and this is the average of what everything's, even though we know you hear a lot of high prices for hourly wages right now. It is right in the middle of what we usually recommend. So that's why it's being recommended at $13.33. But it's definitely open if you guys wanted to discuss it.
Any other questions? Dr. Stormy Harris?
I'm here. I don't have any questions.
All right. Thank you, sir. You might as well stay there. I'm sure you're gonna speak on the rest of these, so. Roll call.
Dave Rockwell,
Yeah.
Dr. Stormy Harris, Dr. Stormy Harris,
Yes.
Mike Manderly,
Yes.
Megan Wilson,
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Terrell Williams.
Yes. Item B, non-affiliated salary proposal for 2022-2023 school year. Can I get a motion to approve? So moved.
Second.
So you have two items on here, actually. So the number one is, starting last year, we changed our recommendation to be based on the consumer price index urban from March to March. So March of 2021 to March of 22, the increase was 8.5%. We have a cap in our proposal of 3% and a floor of 1%. So the recommendation is to have the 3% increase on the non-affiliated, which is 38 positions. There's also a step that last year we didn't put a cap on the step, but this year we are stating that all non-affiliated will follow the administration process. Administration has salary or booklet has 12 steps. Non-affiliated will have 12 steps. So we are monitoring that, and the step is 1.5 on top of the recommended 3%. Then you also, and the board has done a good job trying to have some authority over this recommendation. However, it is being recommended a retirement option. So any non-affiliated employee who is planning to retire by the end of 23-24, they would need to give us, is recommended that they would give us notice by July 15th of this year, 22. Allows us to forecast and prepare for replacement of that position. If they do give us notice, then they will get a 4% increase, and then they'll be locked into 4% this year, this coming year of 22-23 and 23-24, or when they retire within those 2 years.
We're kind of assuming that if you have 12 steps, that if you're getting close to retirement, you wouldn't be getting the 1.5% step in the final year.
Correct.
So we're actually given an extra 1%.
In this case.
Okay.
Any other questions? Dr. Stern Harris? I skipped you once, so I'm gonna ask every time now.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Williams. I don't have any questions.
All right, roll call.
Mike Medley,
Yes.
Dr. Stern Harris,
Yes.
Dave Ruffalo,
Yes.
Megan Wilson.
Yes.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Terrell Williams.
Yes, we're on item C, administrator salary and retirement recommendation for the 2022-23 school year. Can I get a motion to approve?
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any conversation or questions? I'm assuming it's the same.
Yeah,
Same
same,
spiel for
follow the
this.
same process.
All right. Roll call.
Dr. Stern Harris,
Yes.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Megan Wilson.
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Dave Ruffalo,
Yes.
Mike Medley,
Yes.
Terrell Williams.
Yes. Moving on to item D, non-affiliated salary adjustment for the 2022-2023 school year. Can I get a motion to approve?
Second.
Seconded. Mr. Ruiz.
So this position is our translator coordinator who has been with the district for multiple years. That position, with the growth of our English learners in the district, our refugee move-ins, our immigrant move-ins, and the need within the district to provide translators and interpreters, it has been determined that this position go to a 12-month position. Talking position only. So this is the adjustment based on the market value and our job analysis that it is recommended this increases to the $66,478 salary to go 12 months. On a side note, this individual has been absolutely phenomenal on organizing and facilitating the needs throughout the entire district at every building. So it's well needed. She's done a phenomenal job.
Deegan, can you remind me what it's going to a 12-month of this salary? What is it currently?
It's 220.
220.
Yeah. And that was extended, I want to say 5-6 years ago. Because I think it was 200 then.
Is that 10 month or 11?
It was a flexible, so roughly it was 11 months. Which fall in that category.
Perfect. All right, Dr. Stony Harris, any questions on this matter?
No questions.
I'm gonna get there. Anyone else on the board? No? Okay, roll call.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Megan Wilson.
Yes.
Mike Medley,
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Dave Ruffalo,
Yes.
Dr. Stern Harris,
Yes.
Terrell Williams.
Yes. Before the next item is, we've had a chance to see this. Is anybody gonna wanna go into executive session to discuss the last item? Dr. Stony Harris?
What was your question? I apologize.
Are you gonna request to go into executive session to discuss this last action item?
Well,
If you're gonna request it, I just want to make sure. it's got to that
okay.
point.
Yeah, I would like to.
Okay. So can we get a motion to, well, do we have to, does it have to be a motion on the floor before we go into executive session?
Sure.
It's action.
Right, it's an
Yeah.
action item, so
All right, so let's get a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded.
I move that we move to executive session to discuss employment matters.
Second.
Moved and seconded, roll call.
Mike Mattingly,
Yes.
Dr. Stone Harris,
Yeah.
Dave Rockwell,
Yes.
Megan Wilson. Yes. Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
No.
and Terrell Williams.
Yes, there will be action on this item. Executive session, and we're back into our general meeting. We have an active motion on the floor. All board members are back present, so roll call.
Dr. Stone Harris, Dr. Stone Harris. Welcome back. Dave Rockwell,
Yes.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Megan Wilson.
Yes.
Mike Mattingly,
Yes.
Terrell Williams,
Yes.
and Dr. Stone Harris.
Yes. I couldn't unmute myself. I heard you calling my name.
All right, that concludes all of our action items for the evening. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Probably moved and seconded, roll call.
Megan Wilson.
Yes.
Mike Mattingly.
Yes.
Dr. Stone Harris,
Yes.
Gary Rowe,
Yes.
Dave Rockwell,
Yes.
Tracy Pugh,
Yes.
Terrell Williams.
Yes. All right, with that meeting.
Is anyone going to?
Have a good night, everyone.